My name is Taylor, and at 32 years old, I watched everything I built crumble by my own hands. For 5 years, I poured my soul into coding a platform that transformed my father Richard's company from a startup to an industry leader. Then my stepsister Stephanie waltzed in with zero technical skills but plenty of ambition. What followed was a betrayal so deep that I made a decision no developer should ever consider. I took back what was mine. Before I dive into how I lost everything I built, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, and subscribe if you want to hear more stories about workplace justice. I fell in love with coding when I was 12. While other kids were playing video games, I was learning how to build them. My room was always filled with programming books, and my dad Richard would find me asleep at my keyboard most mornings. He never really understood what I was doing, but he was proud. My little genius, he called me, ruffling my hair as I showed him my latest project. Richard was a businessman through and through. He had big ideas but limited technical knowledge. He built a modestly successful construction supply company but always dreamed of something bigger. We would sit at our kitchen table on Sunday mornings, him with his coffee and business journals, me with my laptop, and talk about the future. There has to be a better way to manage construction projects, he would say, frustrated after hearing complaints from his clients. The industry is stuck in the Stone Age. Those conversations planted a seed that would eventually grow into BuildConnect, but that was still years away. I excelled in high school and earned a full scholarship to Stanford's computer science program. College was everything I hoped for: challenging professors, like-minded peers, and access to cutting-edge technology. I thrived in that environment, quickly rising to the top of my class. By my third year, I was already taking graduate-level courses and conducting research with professors. Then came the call that changed everything. "Taylor," my father's voice sounded strained over the phone. "I need your help. I think it's time to build that software we always talked about." His construction supply business was struggling as larger competitors moved in. He explained that he wanted to pivot to technology, specifically to create a software platform that would revolutionize how construction projects were managed. He had some seed funding from investors who trusted his industry knowledge, but he needed someone who could actually build the product. Someone like me. It wasn't an easy decision to drop out of Stanford with just 1 year left. My advisors thought I was making a huge mistake. My friends couldn't understand why I would abandon a promising academic career, but I believed in my father's vision, and more importantly, I believed in my ability to make it real. 22 years old, armed with nothing but determination and code, I moved back home and started working in our garage. The first 6 months were brutal. I coded for 18 hours a day, subsisting on energy drinks and takeout. My father would bring me food, sometimes sitting silently beside me, just to provide company as I typed away into the early morning hours. BuildConnect was born from those sleepless nights. I created a platform that digitized every aspect of construction management, from initial blueprints to final inspections, from material ordering to contractor scheduling. The interface was intuitive enough for construction veterans who barely used email, yet powerful enough to handle complex multi-year projects. While I built the software, my father leveraged his industry connections to secure our first clients. We launched with 3 small construction companies willing to take a chance on us. Within 6 months, they were telling others. Within a year, we had 20 clients and needed to hire our first employees. I moved out of my childhood bedroom into a tiny studio apartment 5 minutes from our new office. It was all I could afford and all I needed. Every spare dollar went back into the company. I postponed dating, friendships, and any semblance of a personal life. BuildConnect became my identity, my purpose, my everything. As the company grew, so did my team. I hired brilliant developers who shared my vision. We worked ridiculous hours together, celebrating small victories with cheap champagne and tackling setbacks with determination. These people became my family, bound by lines of code and shared ambition. By year 3, we had 50 employees in a prestigious downtown office. BuildConnect had become the go-to software for mid-sized construction companies across the country. Industry publications were writing about us. Investors were calling. We were no longer the scrappy startup we had arrived. Through it all, I remained the chief technology officer, the architect of our success. My development team respected me not because I was the founder's daughter, but because I had built the foundation of everything we did. I knew every function, every algorithm, every line of code that powered our platform. BuildConnect wasn't just my job, it was my creation. Among the early hires was Marcus, my father's old friend from business school who joined as our chief financial officer. Marcus was everything my father needed in a financial partner conservative when my father got too excited, encouraging when challenges seemed insurmountable. He became a mentor to me as well, helping me understand the business side of technology in ways my computer science classes never covered. Taylor, understanding the code is only half the battle, he would tell me. Understanding the money is how you survive long enough to build something that matters. Life was good, hard, exhausting, but good. I was living my purpose, building something meaningful alongside people I respected. My relationship with my father had never been stronger. We were partners in the truest sense, each bringing our unique strengths to a shared vision. Then everything changed when my father met Caroline at a charity gala. Caroline was beautiful, sophisticated, and widowed just a year earlier. She worked in luxury real estate and moved in social circles my father had only recently entered thanks to BuildConnect's success. Their romance was swift and intense. Within 6 months, they were engaged. "You'll love her, Taylor," my father assured me. "And her daughter Stephanie is about your age. You'll finally have a sister." I was happy for him. My mother had passed away when I was 15, and he deserved to find love again. I was so consumed with BuildConnect that I barely registered the implications of this new family dynamic. I had no idea that Caroline's daughter Stephanie would soon become a central figure in my professional life, and not in a good way. The wedding was beautiful, intimate. I stood beside my father, genuinely pleased to see him happy. Caroline seemed lovely, if a bit reserved toward me. Stephanie was charming and effusive, talking excitedly about getting to know her new family. She hugged me tightly at the reception. "I always wanted a sister," she said, champagne glass in hand, "especially one who's basically a genius. We're going to be so close." If only I had recognized the calculation behind that smile. If only I had known what was coming. But I was too focused on our company's growing pains, on our expanding client base, and the technical challenges that came with scale. I had no idea that this wedding was the beginning of the end of everything I had built. 3 months after the wedding, Stephanie began appearing at our office. At first, it was just casual visits, bringing lunch for her mother and Richard, who had recently brought Caroline on as our office manager. But these visits became more frequent, and I often noticed her lingering after meetings, asking questions about our business model. Stephanie had a marketing degree from a mid-tier state university and a resume filled with jobs she never kept for more than a year. She was 31, same as me, but our paths couldn't have been more different. While I was building software that transformed an industry, she had bounced between social media management roles, event planning positions, and marketing coordinator jobs. Nothing seemed to stick. Yet she carried herself with the confidence of a seasoned executive. She had a gift for corporate jargon and could charm anyone in a room within minutes. My father was particularly susceptible to her charisma. "Stephanie has such great ideas about our market positioning," he mentioned casually one evening when we were working late. "She really understands brand storytelling." I nodded noncommittally, focused on debugging a particularly tricky section of code. I didn't think much of it until 2 weeks later, when my father called an all-hands meeting to announce that Stephanie would be joining BuildConnect as our new director of business development. My coffee mug nearly slipped from my hand. Director A, C-level position created out of thin air for someone with no relevant experience. I shot a glance at Marcus, whose carefully neutral expression told me he was equally surprised. "Stephanie will be focusing on expanding our market reach and refining our brand strategy," my father explained enthusiastically. "Her fresh perspective is exactly what we need as we enter our next growth phase." Later that day, I cautiously approached my father in his office. "Dad, I'm a little confused about Stephanie's role," I said carefully. "We already have a marketing team, and Jackson has been leading business development successfully for 2 years. "This is different, Taylor," he replied dismissively. "Stephanie will be operating at a more strategic level. Jackson does good work, but Stephanie has a vision for where we could be." "Based on what experience?" I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. My father's expression hardened slightly. Based on her understanding of market dynamics and consumer psychology, not everything is about technical expertise, Taylor. We need people who can communicate our value in ways non-technical clients understand. I let it go, not wanting to create tension. Perhaps Stephanie would surprise me. Perhaps she genuinely wanted to contribute to our success. Those hopes were quickly dashed. Within weeks, Stephanie had established herself as a disruptive force. She began showing up at my team's product planning meetings uninvited, offering suggestions that revealed her complete lack of understanding about our software architecture or user needs. We should add social media integration to every page, she insisted during one session, and gamification elements. People love badges and points. My lead developer, Aiden, shot me a pained look. We were building enterprise software for construction project management, not a mobile game or social network. That's not really aligned with our users' workflows, I explained patiently. Construction managers need efficiency and reliability, not social features. That's such old-school thinking, Stephanie replied with a dismissive wave. Every platform needs social elements now. Trust me on this. These interactions became increasingly common. Stephanie would insert herself into technical discussions without understanding the context, then get offended when her ideas weren't immediately embraced. Worse, she began scheduling important client calls during times she knew I had standing meetings with my development team, effectively excluding me from customer interactions. The first time it happened, I assumed it was an innocent scheduling conflict. By the third time, the pattern was unmistakable. I noticed you weren't at the global build call yesterday, Marcus mentioned as we grabbed coffee one morning. I wasn't invited, I replied. It was scheduled during my weekly code review. Marcus frowned. That's odd. They specifically asked about the new inspection module you designed. What did Stephanie tell them? She presented it as a collaborative effort, but he hesitated. She implied it was primarily her concept that the development team executed. My stomach tightened. This wasn't just about seeking attention. Stephanie was systematically taking credit for my work. I began documenting these incidents, following Marcus's advice to create a paper trail. I saved emails, recorded meetings when appropriate, and kept detailed notes of troubling interactions. Meanwhile, Stephanie was working her charm on my father at every opportunity. They would have lunch together several times a week, and she was a constant presence at his and Caroline's home. Family dinners became strategy sessions where Stephanie would present ambitious marketing ideas that ignored technical limitations or development timelines. We should promise real-time satellite imagery integration by next quarter, she announced during one Sunday dinner. That would require completely rebuilding our backend, I pointed out. Plus, licensing costs would be prohibitive for the marginal benefit it would provide most users. Taylor always focuses on the problems instead of the possibilities, Stephanie said with a laugh, touching my father's arm. That's why you need both of us, right, Richard? The dreamer and the doer. My father nodded appreciatively at this framing. Balance is important in business. We need innovation and practicality. What he failed to recognize was that true innovation came from understanding the practical realities of your technology, not from making promises you couldn't keep. The real breaking point came 3 months after Stephanie joined, when she convinced my father to delay a critical software update my team had been working on for months. The update included major security improvements and performance optimizations our clients had been requesting. We should hold off until we can bundle it with the new user interface. Stephanie has been conceptualizing, my father told me. Make a bigger splash in the market. Dad, the UI redesign is still just mock-ups. It would take at least 2 more months to implement, and our clients need these security updates now. 2 months isn't that long in the grand scheme of things, he replied. Stephanie says a coordinated release will generate much more press coverage and client excitement. Since when do we prioritize press coverage over client needs? I asked, unable to hide my frustration. My father gave me a disappointed look. Since we became a major player in this industry, Taylor, you need to think bigger. Stephanie understands market perception in ways you don't. That night I couldn't sleep. The father who had always valued substance over style, who had built his first business on reliability and client service, was suddenly chasing publicity and flash. The shift coincided precisely with Stephanie's arrival. My development team was growing increasingly frustrated as well. They had worked nights and weekends to complete the security update only to have it shelved for marketing reasons. "Is this how things work now?" Aiden asked me privately. "We just sit on critical fixes because they're not flashy enough." I had no good answer. My authority as CTO was being systematically undermined, and my father, the person who had always been my greatest ally, was becoming unrecognizable. The divide between us grew wider with each passing week. In meetings, he would look to Stephanie first for input, even on technical matters. When I raised concerns about development priorities, he would cut me off with, "Let's table this for now," only to approve Stephanie's requests without question. My isolation became more pronounced at family gatherings. Caroline and Stephanie would discuss company decisions while excluding me from the conversation, creating a united front with my father. I began to feel like an outsider in both my family and the company I had helped build. Desperate to prove my value, I began working even later hours, developing an innovative new feature I hoped would remind my father of my contributions. It was a machine learning algorithm that could analyze historical project data to predict potential delays and budget overruns before they occurred, something no competitor offered. I worked on it mostly alone, not even telling my team until I had a working prototype. When it was ready, I scheduled a special presentation for the leadership team, including my father and inevitably Stephanie. The demonstration went flawlessly. The algorithm accurately identified risk patterns in our test data and suggested mitigation strategies that could save clients millions. Even Marcus, usually reserved in technical discussions, was visibly impressed. "This is remarkable, Taylor," he said. "The predictive accuracy is unlike anything I've seen." My father nodded along, clearly recognizing the potential. For a moment, I felt a glimmer of hope that things might change. Then Stephanie spoke up. "It's definitely interesting from a technical perspective," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "But I wonder if our clients will understand the value proposition. It seems very complex. That's why we would create a simple dashboard to display the insights," I explained, trying to maintain my composure. "Still, I think we should consider whether this aligns with our current market positioning," she continued. "We've been focusing on ease of use and visual clarity in our messaging. This seems to pull us in a different direction." I watched as uncertainty crept into my father's expression. "Stephanie raises some good points," he said finally. "Let's not rush into anything. We should discuss how this fits into our overall strategy." Just like that, my breakthrough was relegated to further discussion, which I knew meant indefinite delay. Meanwhile, Stephanie's cosmetic UI changes continued to receive immediate approval and resource allocation. As I packed up my laptop after the meeting, I overheard Stephanie talking to my father in the hallway. It was impressive technical work she was saying, but this is exactly why Taylor needs guidance on the business side. She gets lost in the code without considering the market implications. "You're probably right," my father replied. "She's always been that way, brilliant but narrowly focused." Their voices faded as they walked away, leaving me standing alone in the conference room, feeling like a stranger in the company I had helped create. The situation deteriorated rapidly over the next few weeks. I discovered that Stephanie had been holding private meetings with our biggest client, BuildConnect, a construction conglomerate managing projects worth billions across 3 continents. They represented nearly 20% of our annual revenue, and I had personally designed custom features to meet their specific needs. I learned about these meetings by accident when BuildConnect's Chief Operating Officer Lawrence mentioned them during a technical support call. "As I was telling Stephanie last week, we're really excited about the direction she's taking BuildConnect," he said casually. "The rebranding sounds promising." "Rebranding?" I echoed, completely caught off guard. "Yes, the shift toward a more integrated business intelligence platform." She showed us some mock-ups that looked quite impressive. My blood ran cold. There was no approved rebranding strategy or pivot to business intelligence. At least none that had been shared with me, the person responsible for our actual product development. That evening, I stayed late at the office, combing through Stephanie's company emails that were accessible on our shared server. What I found was alarming: dozens of communications with BuildConnect and other major clients, outlining a strategic vision for BuildConnect that bore little resemblance to our actual product roadmap or technical capabilities. She was making promises we couldn't keep, describing features we hadn't built, and positioning herself as the company's visionary leader, all without any input from the technical team that would actually need to deliver on these fantasies. The next morning, I requested an urgent meeting with my father. When I entered his office, I found Stephanie already seated across from him, both of them reviewing a presentation on his laptop. "Taylor, perfect timing," my father said, with an enthusiasm that felt forced. Stephanie was just walking me through her ideas for our next phase of growth. "That's actually why I wanted to talk to you," I said, remaining standing. "I've learned about meetings and commitments being made to clients without any consultation with the development team." My father's smile faltered slightly. "What do you mean?" "Stephanie has been telling Global Build about a complete rebranding and product pivot that no one has discussed with me or my team. She's promising features we haven't even started developing." Stephanie didn't flinch. "I've been exploring market opportunities, Richard. As we discussed, we need to be more forward-thinking and less constrained by current technical limitations." "By lying to our biggest client?" I asked incredulously. "Not lying," she replied smoothly. "Casting a vision. The technical details can be worked out later." My father cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Taylor, I think you're overreacting. Stephanie is doing her job, identifying market opportunities and positioning us competitively. Dad, there's a difference between aspirational marketing and misrepresentation. Some of what she's promising would take years to develop if it's even technically feasible." "Well, maybe that's the problem," Stephanie interjected, her voice gentle but firm. "Perhaps we're too focused on technical limitations rather than possibilities. Other companies manage to innovate rapidly." "Other companies don't build mission-critical software for the construction industry," I countered. "Our clients rely on our stability and reliability to manage billion-dollar projects." My father sighed deeply. "I think we need to find a balance here. Taylor, you've always been cautious, which has served us well in many ways. But Stephanie brings a fresh perspective that I believe we need right now." It was clear I wasn't going to win this argument. I left the meeting feeling defeated and increasingly isolated. Over the following days, I noticed my father spending more time with Stephanie, their office doors closed during lengthy strategy sessions from which I was excluded. When I did get included in meetings, my father increasingly criticized my leadership style, calling me too technical and not visionary enough. "We need to think bigger" became his constant refrain, echoing Stephanie's exact words. The development team felt the shift too. Priorities would change overnight based on Stephanie's latest idea, forcing them to abandon work already in progress. Resources were diverted from critical infrastructure improvements to flashy but superficial features Stephanie insisted would wow clients. Aiden and the other senior developers remained loyal to me, often staying late to help implement my machine learning project off the books. They could see what was happening, but like me, felt powerless to stop it. "This isn't sustainable," Aiden told me one night as we ordered takeout during yet another late work session. "She's steering us toward a cliff, and your father can't see it." "I know," I replied, rubbing my tired eyes. "But what can I do? He's not just my boss, he's my dad, and he's completely under her spell." The personal dimension of this betrayal cut deepest. Family dinners became increasingly unbearable as Caroline and Stephanie would openly discuss company decisions while excluding me from the conversation. They had created a new family unit with my father, and I was clearly not a central member. One Sunday evening, as we sat around the dining table at my father and Caroline's home, Stephanie casually mentioned a meeting she had scheduled with venture capitalists interested in a possible Series B funding round. "Series B?" I questioned, setting down my fork. "This is the first I'm hearing about this." "Oh, I thought Richard would have mentioned it," Stephanie replied innocently. "We've been discussing it for weeks." I looked at my father, who at least had the decency to appear slightly embarrassed. "It's still very preliminary," he said. "Nothing to concern yourself with yet." "Nothing to concern myself with," I repeated incredulously. "A major funding round that would affect our entire company structure and strategy isn't something the CTO should know about." "Taylor," Caroline interjected with a tight smile, "business discussions can wait until tomorrow. Let's enjoy our family time." "This is my business," I insisted, "the business I helped build from nothing." "And no one's denying that," Stephanie said soothingly. "Your technical contributions have been valuable. But as we scale, different expertise becomes important. Richard and I are just making sure we're prepared for the next phase." The phrase, "Your technical contributions have been valuable," rang in my ears like a eulogy for my role in the company. I was being relegated to a specialized technician rather than a founding partner. After dinner, I confronted my father privately in his study. "Dad, what's happening here? Why am I being pushed out of strategic decisions?" He looked uncomfortable but resolute. "You're not being pushed out, Taylor. But I do think your strengths are in execution rather than vision. Stephanie has opened my eyes to growth possibilities I hadn't considered, based on what expertise I demanded. Her string of failed marketing jobs. Her complete lack of understanding of our technology." "That's unfair," he said, his voice hardening. "Stephanie understands business positioning and market dynamics. Not everything is about code." "But everything in our company depends on code," I countered. "We're a software company. Our product is code." He shook his head dismissively. "We're a solutions company. The code is just how we deliver those solutions." It was at that moment I realized how complete Stephanie's influence had become. My father, who had once proudly told investors that our competitive advantage was our superior software architecture, now viewed our actual product as merely incidental to some vague notion of solutions. I left that night with a heaviness in my chest I'd never experienced before. The betrayal wasn't just professional. It was deeply personal. The father who had believed in me enough to start this company now saw me as limited, as someone to be managed rather than partnered with. Despite this growing alienation, I continued working tirelessly on my predictive analytics feature, hoping against hope that its undeniable value would reset the balance. I pulled all-nighters, refined algorithms, improved the user interface, and extensively tested it with historical data from our largest clients. The result was remarkable, a system that could identify potential project delays weeks before they would become apparent through traditional management methods. It wasn't just an incremental improvement, it was a potential game changer for the entire construction management industry. I scheduled another presentation this time, including the entire executive team and board of directors. I prepared meticulously, creating clear visuals to explain complex concepts and compiling case studies showing the potential financial impact. The presentation went even better than I had hoped. The board members asked insightful questions that demonstrated they grasped both the technical innovation and business potential. Several exchanged impressed glances during my demonstration of how the system had predicted actual delays in historical projects with 87% accuracy. For a brief moment, I felt my confidence returning. This was what I was born to do: solve complex problems with elegant code. Surely now my father would remember the value I brought to BuildConnect. As the meeting concluded, our lead board member Victor approached me directly. "Exceptional work, Taylor," he said warmly. "This kind of innovation is exactly why we invested in BuildConnect. I haven't seen anything like it in the construction tech space." My father stood nearby, and I could see conflict in his expression, pride in the positive reception, but discomfort at the praise being directed solely at me rather than Stephanie, who was watching with a tight smile from across the room. The momentary triumph was short-lived. The very next day, my father called me into his office to inform me that while my project was interesting, we would need to integrate it thoughtfully into Stephanie's broader vision for the platform. "Her vision," I repeated incredulously. "Dad, this feature is ready to deploy now. It doesn't need to be integrated into some hypothetical rebrand that hasn't even been properly defined." "Taylor," he said with a sigh, "this is exactly the problem. You see your technical projects in isolation, while Stephanie understands how everything needs to work together as a cohesive business strategy." I left his office feeling more defeated than ever. No amount of technical brilliance or innovation seemed capable of breaking through the spell Stephanie had cast. That night, alone in my apartment, I reached a painful realization. I was losing my company and my father simultaneously, and there seemed to be nothing I could do to stop it. 2 weeks later came the annual leadership retreat, a 3-day event at a mountain resort where we traditionally set our strategy for the coming year. All department heads and the executive team would attend, along with key board members. I arrived early, determined to make one last effort to reassert my vision for BuildConnect's technical future. I had prepared extensive documentation, competitive analyses, and a clear roadmap that incorporated legitimate business needs while maintaining our technical integrity. The first sign of trouble was the agenda. Previously, I had always co-led these retreats with my father. This time my name appeared only once for a brief technical update scheduled between lunch and the afternoon break on day 2. Stephanie, however, was featured prominently leading sessions on brand evolution, market positioning, and strategic vision. When I questioned this change, my father merely said, "We're emphasizing different aspects this year. The business strategy needs more attention than the technical infrastructure." The retreat began with my father's opening address, which traditionally reviewed our progress and set the tone for discussions. This time, his speech centered almost entirely around our exciting new direction and breaking free from technical constraints to embrace market opportunities. He spoke about BuildConnect as if it were a marketing company that happened to have a software product rather than a technology company solving real industry problems. Stephanie sat in the front row, nodding enthusiastically at each point. I scanned the room, noting the confused expressions of several longtime employees who had been with us since the early days. Marcus caught my eye from across the table, his face carefully neutral but his eyes communicating concern. The morning sessions were dominated by Stephanie presenting her vision for the company, one that bore little resemblance to the BuildConnect I had helped create. She spoke of lifestyle integration, emotional connection to construction management, and other marketing concepts that seemed bizarrely misaligned with our enterprise software's purpose. During breaks, several of my technical team members approached me with worried questions. "Is this really happening?" Aiden asked quietly as we refilled our coffee cups. "Half of what she's proposing would require scrapping our entire architecture and starting over." "I don't know," I admitted, "but it doesn't seem like my input carries much weight anymore." By lunch on the second day, my sense of dread had grown overwhelming. I had been systematically sidelined in nearly every discussion with my father, repeatedly deferring my technical concerns to later follow-up discussions that never seemed to materialize. Then came the moment that shattered everything. After lunch, instead of proceeding to my scheduled technical update, my father asked everyone to return to the main conference room for a special announcement. Stephanie stood beside him at the podium, practically glowing with poorly concealed triumph. "As BuildConnect enters its next growth phase, we need to ensure our leadership structure positions us for maximum success," my father began. "After careful consideration and discussions with our board, I'm excited to announce some organizational changes effective immediately." A slide appeared on the screen behind him showing a new organizational chart. At the top was my father as chairman. Directly below him in the CEO position previously held by my father was Stephanie's name and photo. My name appeared farther down under a new title, Head of Development. The room fell silent. I felt as though all the oxygen had been sucked out of my lungs. "Stephanie has demonstrated exceptional vision and business acumen since joining BuildConnect," my father continued, seemingly oblivious to my shock. "Her background in marketing and brand development, combined with her fresh perspective on our industry, makes her ideally suited to lead us into this new chapter." I barely heard the rest of his speech. Blood rushed in my ears as I tried to process what was happening. I had been demoted not just slightly but dramatically in the company I had helped build from nothing. I sat frozen until the session ended, then mechanically gathered my laptop and notes. Several team members tried to catch my eye, but I couldn't bear to engage. I needed to speak with my father alone. I found him in his suite reviewing notes for the next day's sessions. Stephanie was nowhere to be seen, probably already celebrating her coup. "Dad, we need to talk," I said, closing the door behind me. He looked up, his expression a mixture of discomfort and resolution. "Taylor, I know this is a surprise." "A surprise," I interrupted, my voice shaking. "It's a complete betrayal. How could you make Stephanie CEO? She has no experience running a company, no understanding of our technology, and she's been here less than a year." "She has exactly what we need right now," he replied firmly. "Fresh perspective, marketing savvy, and the ability to position us for acquisition or IPO. The board agrees that your technical skills are valuable but limited in scope." "Limited," I repeated incredulously. "I built this company with you. Everything that makes BuildConnect valuable came from my work and my team's work." "And that contribution is appreciated," he said in a tone that suggested I was being irrational. "That's why you're still heading development. But Stephanie brings a broader vision that frankly you've resisted at every turn." I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "Dad, this isn't just about titles. Stephanie has been systematically undermining our core product integrity with promises we can't keep and features that make no sense for our users. She's going to run this company into the ground. I think that's an emotional overreaction, he said dismissively. Change is always difficult, especially when it affects our perceived status. His condescension cut deeply. This wasn't my father, the partner. This was Richard, the businessman, making a cold calculation that I had become expendable. Why? I asked finally, my voice barely above a whisper. Why her instead of me? Something shifted in his expression, a moment of honesty breaking through the corporate facade. This is for my best child, he said quietly, pulling a document from his briefcase, the updated company governance agreement he'd already signed. Stephanie understands what BuildConnect can become in ways you never have. She sees beyond the code to the bigger picture. The phrase, my best child, echoed in my head like a physical blow. After everything we had built together, after all the nights I had sacrificed sleep to bring his vision to life, I was now second best, replaced by someone who had contributed nothing to our success. I left his suite without another word, returning to my room and locking the door. For hours I sat motionless on the edge of the bed, replaying 5 years of memories, the triumphs, the challenges overcome, the partnership I thought was unbreakable. Around midnight, a text from Marcus arrived. Are you okay? This is wrong on every level. Want to talk? I appreciated his concern but couldn't bring myself to respond. What was there to say? The decision had been made. The next morning I skipped the retreat sessions and instead went to the business center. There I drafted a simple professional resignation letter, effective immediately. No drama, no recriminations, just a clean break. As I was printing the letter, Marcus found me. Taylor, you can't just leave, he said, his normally composed demeanor showing genuine distress. The development team will fall apart without you. The entire product could be at risk. That's not my problem anymore, I replied, surprising myself with how calm I felt. My father and Stephanie have made their choice. Now I'm making mine. At least take some time to think about it, he urged. Don't make a decision while you're hurting. I looked at him, this kind man who had always been in my corner, and felt a wave of gratitude. I appreciate your concern, Marcus. I really do. But I already know what I need to do. I handed him my room key. Could you turn this in for me? I'm going to drive back to the city now. What should I tell them? He asked. The truth, I replied simply. I've resigned, effective immediately. I left the resort without saying goodbye to anyone else. During the 2-hour drive back to the city, a strange calm settled over me. The shock and hurt remained, but beneath them was a growing clarity about what needed to happen next. When I arrived at the office, it was mostly empty. Everyone who mattered was still at the retreat. I went to my office and found that Stephanie had already begun the process of moving in. My awards and degrees had been taken down, my personal items boxed up. She hadn't even waited for the official announcement to take over. As I stood there, surrounded by half-packed boxes of my professional life, something shifted inside me. This wasn't just about a job or a title. This was about 5 years of my life, thousands of hours of code, and a product that bore my creative imprint in its very DNA. I sat down at my computer and made a decision that would change everything. The office was eerily quiet as evening fell. Even the cleaning staff had finished their rounds and departed, leaving me alone with the gentle hum of servers and the soft glow of emergency exit signs. I sat at my desk, fingers hovering over my keyboard as the weight of what I was considering pressed down on me. 5 years of work, thousands of hours of coding, debugging, refining. BuildConnect wasn't just software. It was my creation, my legacy. And now my father had handed it to someone who saw it as nothing more than a marketing vehicle, a pretty interface to sell rather than a powerful tool to use. I opened our code repository and began navigating through the familiar architecture I had designed. Each module, each function felt like visiting an old friend. This wasn't just code, it was a record of problems solved, challenges overcome. The ethical questions swirled in my mind. What rights did I have to the intellectual property I had created? Legally, it belonged to the company. But morally, I had poured my soul into this software when it was nothing but an idea. Before there were investors, before there was a real company, when it was just my father's dream and my technical ability. I thought carefully about what I was about to do. I wouldn't sabotage the entire system that would hurt innocent clients who depended on our software. I wouldn't take code written by my team members that wasn't mine to claim. But my original algorithms, the core architecture I had designed before we even hired our first additional developer, the proprietary solutions I had created during countless solo all-nighters. Those felt like they belonged to me in some fundamental way that transcended employment contracts. I created a new branch in our version control system and began meticulously combing through the codebase. For each component, I asked myself, did I write this personally? Was this my unique solution? Or was this developed collaboratively with the team? I was painstakingly careful documenting every decision. Only my original work would be affected, not additions from other developers, not modifications made by the team. Just the foundational elements that came from my mind alone. As I worked, I created a comprehensive backup of my contributions. These weren't just random code snippets, they were the algorithmic heart of BuildConnect, the parts that made it unique in the marketplace, the solutions competitors couldn't replicate. Next came the most technically challenging part. I wrote a script that would cleanly remove only my original contributions from the production code base. It wouldn't break the system entirely. Basic functions would still work, but the innovative elements that made BuildConnect superior would disappear. The script was elegant in its precision, designed to execute cleanly without damaging surrounding code. I set it to run with a 12-hour delay, long enough for me to be gone, but not so long that someone might discover my plans. As a final step, I wrote a detailed letter explaining exactly what I had taken, only my personal intellectual contributions and why. I didn't write it in anger, but with a calm clarity that had settled over me like a protective shield. I am removing only what I personally created, I wrote. The unique solutions and algorithms that came from my mind alone. I leave intact all collaborative work and contributions from other team members. Consider this the withdrawal of my intellectual capital from a company that no longer values it. It was nearly 3 a.m. when I finished. I placed my resignation letter and the explanation on Marcus's desk, knowing he would be the first to arrive in the morning. I left my company badge and keys beside the letters. Before leaving, I took one last look around the office where I had spent more waking hours than in my own apartment. Despite everything, I felt a surge of pride in what I had built here. Whatever happened next, no one could take away the fact that I had created something of value. I walked out of the building for the last time at 3:17 in the morning, exactly 5 years and 2 months after I had first walked in with nothing but a laptop and a dream shared with my father. As I drove home through the empty streets, I felt oddly unburdened. I had reclaimed what was rightfully mine, not out of spite but out of self-respect. In the face of betrayal, I had chosen neither passive acceptance nor destructive revenge, but a calibrated response that protected my own interests without causing unnecessary harm. When I arrived home, I turned off my phone, disconnected my email accounts, and closed my laptop. For the first time in years, I was completely unplugged from BuildConnect. I took a long shower, changed into fresh clothes, and fell into a dreamless sleep more peaceful than any I had experienced in months. I woke around noon the next day to sunlight streaming through my blinds. For a moment, I felt panic. I never slept this late, not with morning stand-up meetings and client calls. Then the events of the previous day came flooding back, and with them a strange sense of liberation. I made coffee and checked my phone. 27 missed calls. 15 voicemails. 63 text messages. I set the phone aside without listening or reading any of them. Whatever chaos was unfolding at BuildConnect would unfold without me. Instead, I made myself a proper breakfast for the first time in years: eggs, toast, fresh fruit. I ate slowly by the window, watching people go about their day in the street below. How long had it been since I'd simply sat still and observed the world around me? It wasn't until evening that I finally learned what had happened. My neighbor Lisa knocked on my door, concern evident in her expression. "Taylor, are you okay? I've been seeing some crazy stuff online about BuildConnect." I invited her in and she showed me her phone open to a technology news site with the headline, "BuildConnect suffers catastrophic data loss. Shares plummet 37% in single day." As Lisa scrolled through the article, the picture became clear. My script had executed perfectly that morning, precisely as the newly appointed CEO, Stephanie, was giving her first major presentation to Global Build, our largest client. According to sources cited in the article, Stephanie had been mid-pitch about revolutionary new features when the CFO Marcus had burst into the conference room, tablet in hand. The entire codebase. It's gone, he had reportedly announced, causing immediate panic. The article described how my father had stared in shock at an empty chair where the company's former CTO usually sat during major client meetings. Additional paragraphs detailed how Global Build had immediately withdrawn from partnership talks, concerned about the stability of BuildConnect's platform. Other major clients were reportedly requesting emergency meetings to assess the impact on their operations. The company's stock, which had been trading at record highs just days before, had plummeted as news spread of the technical crisis. Analysts were questioning how a software company could allow such a catastrophic security breach. Of course, it wasn't a breach at all. I had simply reclaimed my intellectual property while leaving the basic system intact. But from the outside, it appeared that BuildConnect had suffered a massive technical failure, one that revealed how dependent they were on code they no longer controlled. I thanked Lisa for her concern and assured her I was fine. After she left, I allowed myself a moment to process what I had learned. I felt no joy in BuildConnect's troubles, but I did feel a certain vindication. My father and Stephanie were learning the hard way that technology companies live and die by their technology, not their marketing narratives. Over the next few weeks, I maintained my silence, ignoring the increasingly desperate messages from my father, Stephanie, and various board members. The only person I responded to was Marcus, confirming that I was safe and well, but declining to discuss BuildConnect's situation. I took a long overdue vacation to a small beach town, renting a cottage with no Wi-Fi, and spending my days walking along the shore, reading actual books, and sleeping more than 4 hours a night for the first time in years. Gradually, the knot of tension I had carried between my shoulders for months began to loosen. A month into my self-imposed exile, I received a text from an unknown number. "It's Marcus. New phone. Can we talk?" Not about them. About the future. I quit too. I called him immediately. "You quit?" I asked when he answered. "2 weeks after you did," he replied, his voice lighter than I remembered. I couldn't stomach what was happening. "But that's not why I'm calling. I want to buy you lunch and discuss an idea." We met at a quiet restaurant far from the BuildConnect office. Marcus looked different, relaxed, casual in jeans and a button-down shirt instead of his usual suit. "You look good," I told him honestly. "Freedom suits me," he replied with a smile. "You too. I don't think I've seen you without dark circles under your eyes since we met." Over lunch, Marcus filled me in on what had happened after my departure. BuildConnect was in serious trouble. Without my code, the platform had reverted to essentially a basic version that lacked all the innovative features that had made it industry-leading. Stephanie had been completely unprepared for the crisis. Her marketing background offered no solutions to a fundamentally technical problem. Several key developers had quit in the aftermath, unwilling to rebuild from scratch what had taken years to create the first time. "Your father finally realized what Stephanie actually brings to the table," Marcus said, "which is essentially nothing of substance." "And how is he?" I asked, surprised to find I still cared. "Humbled. Possibly ruined. The board is considering legal action against him for the leadership changes that precipitated this disaster. Global Build canceled their contract completely, and 3 other major clients followed suit." I nodded, taking this in. "And Stephanie?" "Gone. Vanished the moment things got difficult. Last I heard, she was interviewing for marketing positions on the other side of the country, conveniently leaving your father and Caroline to deal with the fallout." I wasn't surprised. People like Stephanie never stuck around for the consequences of their actions. "But enough about the past," Marcus said, leaning forward. "I want to talk about the future. Specifically yours, and potentially mine too." He explained that several former clients had reached out to him, dissatisfied with BuildConnect's collapse but still in need of construction management software. They had asked if he knew any way to access the original BuildConnect functionality they had come to rely on. "You still have your code, don't you?" he asked quietly. I nodded slowly. "Of course. The original algorithms, the core architecture, it's all safely backed up." Then you have everything you need to start over, he said. Not BuildConnect 2, but something new. Something better. And this time, you'd be the one in control. Are you proposing what I think you are? A new company. Your technical expertise, my financial and business experience. No interfering family members, no marketing people making promises engineering can't keep. Just a solid product that solves real problems for clients who already know and value what you can build. The idea was simultaneously terrifying and exhilarating. Start over. Build something from the ground up again. I don't know, Marcus, I said hesitantly. The last 5 years nearly broke me. That's because you were fighting against people who should have been supporting you, he replied. This would be different. Equal partnership. Clear boundaries. Mutual respect. I promised to think about it, and we parted with a warmth that reminded me there were still people in the business world worthy of trust. Over the following weeks, I began to sketch out ideas for a new platform, one that would incorporate everything I had learned from BuildConnect while avoiding its pitfalls. I reached out to a few key members of my former development team who had also left, testing their interest in joining a new venture. The response was overwhelming. Not only were they eager to work with me again, but they had specific ideas for improvements they'd never been able to implement under Stephanie's chaotic leadership. 2 months after leaving BuildConnect, I was already assembling the core of a new company, one founded on technical excellence rather than marketing hype. Then came a message I hadn't expected, my father asking to meet. I agreed with considerable hesitation, suggesting a coffee shop near my apartment. When he arrived, I barely recognized him. He had aged years in just months, the confident posture replaced by a stooped weariness. Taylor, he said simply, his voice thick with emotion. Dad, I replied, maintaining my composure. We sat in awkward silence until he finally spoke. I lost everything, he said quietly. The company is filing for bankruptcy next week. The board removed me as chairman. Caroline left when the money started running out. I nodded, unsurprised about Caroline. She had always seemed more attached to my father's success than to him as a person. And Stephanie DePierst asked. Gone. No contact for weeks. He stared into his coffee. She used me, didn't she? Used us both. Yes, I said simply. There was no satisfaction in his realization coming too late. I'm sorry, Taylor, he said, finally meeting my eyes. I betrayed you in every way possible. I chose someone who contributed nothing over the person who built everything. I can't undo that, but I needed you to know that I understand what I did. I had imagined this moment many times over the past months, my father apologizing, acknowledging his mistake. I had thought it would feel vindicating, triumphant even. Instead, I just felt sad for the relationship we had lost and could never fully recover. Thank you for saying that, I replied. It matters that you understand, even if it doesn't change what happened. Is there any way? He began, then stopped himself. No, I have no right to ask anything of you. What is it? I asked, softening slightly. A job. Any position. I could make coffee, answer phones. I just need something to rebuild from. The request stunned me. My father, once the proud CEO of a rising tech company, was asking to be my office assistant. I don't think that would work, I said gently. There's too much history. But I can help you find something suitable elsewhere. You still have valuable experience and connections. He nodded, accepting this boundary with a dignity I hadn't expected. We parted with an awkward hug, not the full reconciliation of a movie ending, but a small step toward a new kind of relationship. One based on mutual respect rather than the intertwined ambitions that had ultimately torn us apart. As I watched him walk away, I realized I had finally let go of the anger that had driven me to take such dramatic action. What remained was a sense of clarity about my own worth and a determination to build something on my own terms. 6 months after walking away from BuildConnect, I found myself in a position I never could have imagined. Founder and CEO of Construct Clarity, a rapidly growing construction software company built on the foundation of my reclaimed code, but expanded with new innovations my team and I had always wanted to implement. Marcus had indeed become my business partner, bringing financial discipline and business acumen that complemented my technical leadership. But unlike my father, he never tried to override my vision or question my expertise in my domain. Our partnership was built on mutual respect and clear boundaries. We had secured initial funding from investors who had followed the BuildConnect saga and recognized the opportunity to back the actual technical brain behind its initial success. More importantly, 3 former BuildConnect clients had signed contracts before we even had a finished product, trusting my reputation and track record. Many of my former team members had joined us, energized by the opportunity to work in an environment where technical excellence was valued above marketing flash. Aiden had become our chief technology officer, allowing me to focus on overall product vision while he managed day-to-day development. Our office culture was everything BuildConnect had started as, but failed to maintain collaborative innovation focused and fundamentally respectful of each person's expertise. We worked hard but maintained healthy boundaries, a lesson I had learned the hard way. I had also learned to protect myself legally. Every line of our partnership agreement, every intellectual property clause, every ownership structure had been carefully crafted with top legal counsel to ensure that what happened at BuildConnect could never happen at Construct. Clarity. My personal life had undergone equally significant changes. I had moved from my tiny apartment to a comfortable house with a dedicated home office and actual living spaces designed for relaxation, not just sleeping between work sessions. I had started dating again, reconnected with old friends, and even taken up hiking on weekends, something the old Taylor would have considered an inexcusable waste of productive coding time. Most surprisingly, I had begun rebuilding a relationship with my father, though, on very different terms than before. He had found a position as a business development consultant for a small construction company, a humbling step down from his former status, but one that utilized his industry knowledge. We met for dinner once a month, carefully avoiding discussion of BuildConnect or Stephanie. Instead, we were slowly getting to know each other as adults, separate from the business entanglement that had defined our relationship for so long. During one such dinner about 9 months after my departure from BuildConnect, my father said something that stuck with me. "You know what I realized, Taylor? I spent so many years focused on building a successful company that I forgot what really mattered: building a successful life. A life with meaningful relationships and integrity." I nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. I made similar mistakes. I poured everything into code, thinking that professional achievement was the only measure of worth. "We both got it wrong," he said with a sad smile. "But at least we're learning, even if it took losing everything to see it." That conversation crystallized the most important lesson I had taken from the whole experience. Sometimes losing everything you built is the only way to discover what you're truly worth. My worth wasn't in the code I wrote or the company I helped build. It was in my creativity, my problem-solving abilities, my resilience, and my capacity to start over when necessary. Those things couldn't be taken away by any betrayal or corporate maneuver. Construct Clarity grew steadily over its first year, gaining a reputation for solid engineering and genuine innovation rather than marketing hype. We remained deliberately smaller than BuildConnect had been, focusing on quality over rapid expansion. One afternoon, Marcus stopped by my office with an interesting piece of news. "Thought you might want to know, BuildConnect officially shut down last week. The remaining assets were sold for pennies on the dollar." I took a moment to absorb this information. The company I had helped build from nothing was now nothing again. Yet, here I was, thriving. "How do you feel about that?" Marcus asked carefully. "Honestly, I feel free," I replied. "The last attachment to that chapter of my life is gone. Now it's just about moving forward." As our company continued to grow, I made it a priority to mentor young developers, particularly women entering the tech field. I shared not just technical knowledge but hard-earned wisdom about setting boundaries, valuing your contributions, and recognizing when loyalty becomes self-destructive. "Never make yourself small to make someone else feel big," I would tell them. "Your technical skills aren't just tools for others to profit from, they're expressions of your unique way of solving problems. Protect them accordingly." The ultimate validation came when Construct Clarity was featured in a major technology publication as a case study in innovative leadership and engineering excellence. The article mentioned the BuildConnect connection but focused primarily on what we were building now rather than the controversy of the past. What gave me the most satisfaction wasn't the professional recognition, though that was gratifying. It was the personal growth I had experienced through this difficult journey. I had learned to value myself beyond my productivity, to set healthy boundaries, and to recognize that sometimes walking away is the strongest move you can make. I still code nearly every day, but now it's because I love it, not because I'm trying to prove my worth or save a company that doesn't value me. The algorithms I create are more elegant than ever, unburdened by the weight of trying to compensate for others' lack of appreciation. Looking back on everything that happened, I realized that erasing that code base wasn't just about taking back my intellectual property. It was about erasing an unhealthy pattern in my life where I allowed my work to be exploited and my contributions minimized. In its place, I wrote something new, a life and career built on self-respect, boundaries, and genuine collaboration. That's the code I'm most proud of writing. So, if you ever find yourself in a situation where your contributions are being devalued, where loyalty has become a one-way street, remember this: your worth isn't determined by those who fail to see it. Sometimes you need to delete what no longer serves you and start fresh with the wisdom you've gained. Have you ever had to walk away from something you built to protect your self-worth? Drop a comment below sharing your experience. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Remember, recognizing your value is the first step toward creating a life where others recognize it too. Thank you for listening to my journey, and may you have the courage to protect what matters most, your dignity and self-respect.